What's up YouTube? So I want to show you a really cool technique for creating generative rhythms using Bitwig stock devices. Okay, so here we are in Bitwig Studio, and for today's video it's a pretty simple technique. I'm basically going to be using noise to derive a kind of rhythmic signal. So first and foremost, what we're going to need is a noise source, and I guess the easiest way to do this in Bitwig is to just create a polygrid and then remove all of the stuff that's in the grid and just pop in a noise signal here. But what I want to do is actually turn down the output because I don't want to blow any speakers. So the trick now is what we want to do is we want to put in the bit 8 device. So what this does is it's actually got a pretty cool system here called chance. And what this does is it basically kind of only allows a certain probability of waveforms through. And you can kind of use this to break down the resolution of the noise signal. So essentially what we're doing is we're generating random audio peaks with the noise, and then using the bit 8, or at least the chance parameter in the bit 8 to reduce the amount of peaks, and thus what it does is it creates almost like a rhythmic signal, which is pretty interesting. So what I want to do here is let's just put a tool at the end of the chain, and I'm going to use this to actually turn down the volume, and we can turn up the volume here. And so now you'll see as we reduce the chance parameter, we're getting a DC signal, but there's no actual audio coming through. And that's because, you see, as we increase it, it kind of increases the resolution of the kind of bit crash, all the way up to that full noise signal. So the trick here is to kind of dial in some chance here, but then also use the gate parameter here. And this kind of only allows audio peaks above a certain point. So I would say use these two to kind of really fine tune and get a kind of rhythmic pattern out of this. Can you hear now? We're just basically generating almost random clicks and pops with the gate on 100% and the chance kind of all the way down. We can hold shift and just fine tune it ever so slightly until we got what we want. But something like this should be perfect. So you're probably thinking like this is pretty pointless, but the idea here is to add a very important tool in Bitwig called the replacer. So what this does is it basically takes an audio input and it basically derives a MIDI trigger from that input. So the trick here is let's just kind of reduce these the size of these modules a little bit. And the trick here is to add a sampler, and then we can kind of just drag in any kind of sound in here. I'm just going to find, that's pretty cool, put that in there. Set the mix to 100% so that it's only going to play the sampler and not the kind of noise signal that we derived from the bit 8 and stuff. And so now what it does is it basically uses that kind of noise pulse that we've created, that random pulse, to trigger a sample. So we can actually go in here and start to fine tune the settings a little bit now that we've got kind of created this rack. Fine tune these chance settings so that we're getting a bit more of a natural rhythm. It's still a little bit random, but there's some tricks to this to really clean it up. Okay, so what we can do is we can jump in here, and in the generator section of this replacer, what we want to do is we want to add in a couple of modules here. We can use a humanize, and what that can do is that can further reduce the chance that a trigger is actually going to be generated. So now if we turn this volume back up again, we've set it to 0 chance. Now there's actually going to be no triggers until we modulate this upwards. Furthermore, we can add a quantize over here. And this is not a pitch quantize. This essentially quantizes stuff to a grid. And I want to set this to 32s. And now we can actually change this forgiveness over here and amount. And that's going to kind of shift it slightly so it's still a little bit humanized. So now it should be on the grid, but still it's randomly generating this pattern for us. So just to make it a little bit more interesting, we can actually apply some effects here. The frequency shifter in Bitwig is really, really cool. Although I find when it's default setting with mix, kind of sounds a bit like a flanger. And then what we can do is we can actually set up a modulator over here on a random. And then if we set this to note, and then we set this to hold, it's only going to trigger randoms when the note is re-triggered. Okay, bear with me. I know it's a bit random, but bear with me. It's going to get good. Okay, let's add a bit of a beat so we can actually know what we're dealing with here. So the real trick with this is like you actually have to resample it, because you obviously don't want it just playing all the time. But the trick is to kind of set it to various different states and then resample clips of it. So what we could also do is we could change the chance here with a random. Okay, so let's bounce that. And then we cherry pick the best parts. If you always feel like you've overcooked it with the effects on this kind of thing, you can always just add another replacer and then just use the mix on it at like halfway, add another sampler here with just a regular sample, you know what I mean, like a hi-hat or something like that. And then another really cool technique is to use this release. So what I generally do is like put a different hi-hat in here, and then what happens is when it releases the note of this one, it'll play the next sampler that's nested in that one's release. So you can kind of stack this infinitely and have another thing in this one's release. Pretty wild. Sometimes it can go a little bit out of time, but I guess it depends how you're triggering it, you know what I mean? We could always just add quantizers there, but sometimes it's nice to get a bit of an off-kilter rhythm. Oh, it's nice. You can even maybe put some effects on just the samplers, like a bit of delay. Awesome. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm going to be posting this instrument rack to my Patreon for all my $5 supporters. So if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link in the description. And as always, if you haven't yet, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel.